Welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Phil Wagner. I'm the founder and CEO of Sparta Science. I'm excited. We've got three special guests today, exemplifying what it means to be a pro. And we'll go through, how that relates to the context we're currently in. I never had the talent to make it as a pro, but as a former athlete and coach, really fueling my work, my passion has been to learn from these types of athletes and how they approach their planning, their season. And when we think about human health and performance, there's really no better place to start than looking at pro athletes. They push the limits of their performance and capabilities on a daily basis. So grateful to be joined today by our all-star panelists. We'll get firsthand insight into how they've taken control of their own health, their own planning, just on a day-to-day process, not only during this time of uncertainty, but also leading up to this point. I'll go through a quick roll call here, introducing them and their background, so you get an idea kind of where they're coming from. I'll start with Mitch Haniger. So Mitch is a San Francisco Bay Area native, went to high school at Archbishop Midi. Powerhouse here in San Jose area, went to Cal Poly, was an All-American outfielder, eventually drafted by the Brewers in the first round, made his way to be the starting outfielder for the Seattle Mariners, was an All-Star in 2018. One of his teammates is also joining us, Tom Murphy. Tom's out from New York, went to school at University of Buffalo, was Mid-American Conference Player of the Year, drafted by the Rockies in the third round, and then made his major league debut in 2015, and now is the catcher for the Seattle Mariners. And our third guest, Keilani Ricketts Tumanavao. How'd that go? Close?
You got it.
Right.
Nailed it.
And then for those you don't know her, by the way, I was stressing about Keilani's last name for about the last 6 hours. For those who don't know, Keilani's softball royalty, so to speak. She's former Bay Area native, went to Archbishop Midi High School, same as Mitch, Power High School for sure. 4 years at University of Oklahoma. She had some success there. She was a World Series champion, two-time Player of the Year, Honda Cup winner, which is the best female athlete in all college sports, three-time first-team All-American, first to win 100 games with 1,000 strikeouts, 50 home runs. So she's a pretty decent softball player, currently playing for the U.S. team, women's team. So I want to thank all three of you for joining us. I think it's going to be a great discussion. And so to start off kind of as pros, you guys control your own destiny, and your movement, your health is a big part of that. And I think each of you has gone through, like most athletes, kind of that aha moment or moments where during various times of your career, this light turns on. There's a critical moment where you get this idea, this is what I've got to be doing. And that can be after an injury, getting to the next level, maybe going from high school to college to pro, and just realizing in some cases you're no longer the best player in the room. And so this question will be for all of you, what does movement health really mean to you as professionals? And maybe is there a point in your career when you really began prioritizing that as a piece? Why don't we start off with you, Mitch? I don't know if there's a point, where you really began prioritizing that movement health piece in your professional or even collegiate career.
Yeah, I would say it started in college. Kind of having some back issues and then coming into Sparta, and you were like, I was wearing a heel lift because I was told my leg was shorter than the other one. And that led to some problems. And then we started training, and you had data to kind of back up what I was feeling and what I was lacking in, instead of kind of just a normal training protocol would be let's just focus on everything and try to become a better athlete and get stronger in all these different areas, when sometimes you don't need to, for instance, be doing squats because you're already got everything you need with the squat. So you should be focusing on a deadlift or something like that. And I think that's, that was the kind of the aha moment for me, is like, oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't be doing certain things and I need to be focused on doing other things. And like, since then I've kind of seen like what I tend to struggle with is usually what I need. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people go to their strengths and like, oh, I love squatting because I can squat 450 pounds. So let me see if I can get up to 500. But yeah, how are you at doing pull-ups, or how are you at doing a different exercise? So for me, it was like, oh, if I'm bad at something, I probably need to focus on it and get stronger in that area.
Yeah, and data can sometimes help coax you, right? That, hey, there's where you head. But yeah, ultimately, I think for many athletes, it's some sort of injury or pain that really kind of puts on, I guess, a check engine light, if you will, right?
Yeah.
Where it really kind of, engages you. Keilani, I don't know if there was any point in your college, pro career, or even high school too, where you kind of at least sparked that awareness of, okay, I've got to figure out a way to understand how I move better and what that really means.
I think for me, with college, I never really had any injuries at all for college. And then going into professional, that's when, for a professional softball athlete, you probably don't know, but it's like, we're kind of on our own in a way. And like, we don't have the strength coaches the way we did in college. We don't have nutritionists. We don't have coaches telling us, what our schedule is looking like for the day. So it's just on our own, trying to figure out what we need, what we need for our body. And so for me, as I got older, I started realizing, what the workouts that I was getting from different strength coaches that I'd been reaching out to, like workouts, what was going to make me feel the best on the field, whether that was with my recovery, whether it was for me, I'm a power pitcher. And so am I going to feel strong on the field? And so being able to feel all those different things at once, it wasn't really for me until when I also started going to Sparta, just seeing the workout, seeing the data, as being able to look at it and seeing like what workouts, how I was able to translate to the field, and being able to see, like what a sports specific workout kind of looked like, which I wasn't necessarily educated on that in the past, especially in college where, we had 20 girls on our team with one strength coach. And we had 45 minutes to get that one the weight workout in. And so she wasn't able to watch all of us. So it was just, kind of pound the weight up and like try to get as heavy as possible in the weight room and just kind of go from there. And so it wasn't until I was around the coaches that were able to educate me on what a sports specific workout kind of looked like. And, that started to make me feel better on the field with recovery. And, it came outside the weight room too, with nutrition and sleep and all the different types of things that kind of come with recovery, and being able to, have that strong feeling last longer. And, for softball athletes, especially when I was playing in Japan, I would have to pitch back-to-back games, or sometimes 2 games in a day and then pitch a game the next day, which, it's a little bit more common for softball. You don't see that in baseball, but, with our natural movement underhand, we'll be able to pitch more. But I think for me, just being able to, get that strong feeling of last a lot longer and being able to like last all those innings that I was putting on my arm throughout the weekend, it definitely was something that made me feel a lot better.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And I think important that, it's not just pitching, it's like what type of pitcher you are, right? In your case, being more of a power pitcher. Now, in baseball, there are some positions that have that back-to-back demand, right? And so good time to switch over to Tom here, as a catcher, that back-to-back approach of having to catch, long games. Tom, I guess same question to you to kick off. Kind of any aha moments for you in your career where, whether it was an injury or a performance disappointment, where you kind of switched on to really be more aware of how you moved and how important that was for your career?
Yeah, so I went to school at the University of Buffalo, like you're talking about, and there I learned max effort strength. That was what we keyed in on. That's where everything was based off of, was pushing numbers, getting as strong as we possibly could, which is great at the time because I wasn't necessarily very strong in the general lifts. But then getting into pro ball, the first short season, had a hamstring injury, just kind of put it to the side, just kept training the way I was in college. Then comes my first full season. And that's when it really started kicking in that, all right, this is time to make a change. I was still training like I was in college 4 days a week, very max effort oriented. And then the next year, I actually ended up having a rotator cuff tear as well in 2014. And that's when it really was like, okay, I need to fully commit to learning how to move better and how to display my strength better in different forms. It was great because that kind of got me into pro ball. I think that physicality, it's a big part of my game. But at the same time, I wasn't able to stay on the field or display it the way that I wanted to. It was very obvious to me that strength, although important, wasn't the most important factor of being the best baseball player on the field. So that's when I really started to take a deeper look into what was going to keep me healthy, and what was going to make me move better to be able to display that strength better. And that's, where Sparta stepped in. And really since 2014, I've been very committed to those movements. And just the overall tone of how I recover and the musculature and the way it feels every day is a stark difference. I'm not having chronic hamstring tightness that I have to deal with and protect during games. I'm not feeling just absolutely miserable every day, body wise, and having to spend hours worth of rolling out to get ready. It's a much different feel. I feel healthy. I feel ready to go every day, and I actually feel refreshed.
Yeah. So for you, that aha moment was really that frequency change of games, right? Going from that collegiate level to professional level, not only the duration of the season, right, but playing 3 days a week, to playing 6 days a week, sometimes 7, right, is a big adjustment with how your body has to prepare. It's hard to do anything max effort with that intense of a frequency. So Keilani, kind of switching back to you, you had mentioned the resources available. Obviously, Oklahoma is a decent sized athletic program, University of Oklahoma, and so going to the professional realm, in softball, as you mentioned, there's not those kinds of resources. How did you have to adapt, as you made that change from college to softball? Like, which habits, changes, anything you wish you did better when you had those resources at Oklahoma versus, the professional realm? So talk a little about that if you can.
I think for me, it was kind of a bit of a trial and error, and, just kind of taking the information, trying to figure out what I need as a pitcher and what I need as a pitcher that also hits. And, at times, like being able to just taking in information, sometimes people are like, oh, pitchers need to run long distance. You need to go on like long runs. And for me, I don't like to go on long runs. I tried it out, and it's like, honestly, I didn't really notice the correlation of how it made my pitching better. And so, I had different strength coaches that I had worked with, and they would send me workouts while I was in Japan, since I spent 6 months out of the year in Japan, and then I spent another 3 months in the pro league here in America in the summer. So I was pretty much in season like 9-10 months out of the year, and just trying out different workouts that way, I guess.
Trial and error.
And yeah, and trying out workouts that, I did in college, and, it just didn't really work well with me. And I think, kind of like what Tom was saying with college, just having to do the max numbers and trying to get as heavy in the weight room. And that wasn't translating well for me when I was having to pitch a lot of games on the weekends and stuff. And so I think when I started to learn more of the movement and the strength stuff at Sparta, and it's it wasn't so much of getting super heavy in the weight room. It was just more of getting the right movements I need for both hitting and both pitching, and being able to find strength in those ways. And, that definitely helped. Like I said earlier, it helped with the recovery, being able to recover quicker and being able to, get the most out of my performance on the field that way.
Yeah, it seems to be a common theme, right, that you guys are hitting on, right? That, as levels change, right, as your body changes, as years goes on, there's different frequencies of competition, and your training program, your philosophy, your body, your movement that's got to adjust in some way in order to account, it's not like, here's who you are, this is how you should train year round, because initially it might be more max effort based on not only who you are at that moment in time, but also, the frequency of your competition schedule. And, I think athletes have to be both convicted that this works for me, but also open, right? Because things are going to change in the future. I mean, all of us are going through a pretty dramatic change right now with COVID and how that's going to affect how we approach things. Yeah. So Mitch, shifting back to you, baseball is the only U.S. sport with, at least a really large, expansive minor league system. Things are certainly better today than 10 years ago, but there's still quite a bit of limited resources, particularly at the lower levels, at least relative to the majors. I think one of the things that's always impressed me about you is that path to the pros for anybody is never a linear one. Certainly not in your case. Talk a little bit about, the chutes and ladders you had to deal with going from the Brewers, right, to the Diamondbacks, working your way up to the big league camp, getting traded. Then all of a sudden, new ownership comes into the Diamondbacks, going all the way back down to the bottom, having to work your way back up all the way over again, tough toll on the body, and the mind, how did, movement, or your approach to physicality, talk about, when you have no control over some of those things that happen, of which teams you play for, which level you're at, how was your planning in terms of your health? How did that help kind of stabilize you during that time?
Yeah. I mean, first thing, like, control the controllables, right? You don't know in baseball and in some other sports too, like you can be traded or released or sent up or sent down at any time at the drop of a hat. So it's just all about, for me, it was all about taking ownership of my career, whether it's diet, sleep, training, hitting, all these different things, and trying to gain as much knowledge as I can in every single category, so that no matter who I play for, no matter who the strength coach is, no matter who's the nutritionist on the team, I have a foundation that I can take wherever I need to go. And really taking ownership of that and learning it for myself. And now, like, trying to build off those things and trying to get better with those things so that I can help the younger players. And now I can take what I know and teach some guys that might not have had the resources that I've had, and the knowledge that I've learned from other veteran players when I was young, and as well as, coming in and training at Sparta, knowing how to take care of my body now, knowing what food I need to be eating, how alcohol can really affect your sleep, and a bunch of different things, and, take someone else and help them and hope that it makes our team better. And that's the whole goal, is to try to learn as much as you can to set yourself up for success, but also bring up the other guys around you, because I think that's how you develop a winning environment. And I think that's what the best leaders and the best players do that win, that they bring up everyone underneath them and everyone around them, and try to get the best out of each guy that's playing right next to you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, baseball is certainly unique in that regard, softball as well, relative to football and basketball, where there's no minor league system right away. They've got all those resources available to them, at least out of college. They don't have to necessarily learn. And at least we've seen anecdotally quite more of a challenge for those athletes who've never been without resources since they were probably a sophomore in high school, and so, the three of you certainly have dealt with, whether it's minor league system or professional softball, dealt with the lack of resources. And, how do you fill those gaps in yourselves with the only constant, right, which is yourself? With that in mind, of kind of owning and understanding training, Tom, you and I have had several kind of deep scientific discussions about physiological principles, biomechanics, training philosophies. You've been interested in training, right, from an early age in your career. How has that kind of methodology, your methodology of training, how's that changed over time?
Yeah, you kind of touched upon it. I think when you become, this far along in the game, you realize how much you want to optimize things. I don't ever want to feel like I'm wasting time. And to me, that takes a huge amount of knowledge to be able to simplify things down to what you need. And I think that's what our conversations always came down to was, okay, well, why would we do this when you could be doing this, and just really mitigate all the necessities down to what you need at that time. And that was huge for me in making that become my everyday process now, to where I get to the field and I have step-by-step process of essentials that I need every day. And I'm doing the little things right every single day to make sure that I'm ready to go. Whereas earlier in my career, maybe things would have gotten a little more complex. Maybe I would have tried to do something that is kind of sexier in a way, that doesn't really translate to kind of being having to play 6 out of 7 days a week. And like we've always talked about, it's that reduction of things. What can we take away as opposed to what can we constantly add? That's really kind of going to keep me on the baseball field and keep me the most consistent that I could be. And just kind of touching upon Mitch, learning for yourself in those situations and coming in with knowledge as opposed to just assuming that everything's going to be handed to you, has been huge in my career. Because like he's saying, at any point in time, you could be a different team, different situation with different people telling you different things. And really what it comes down to is if you haven't accumulated that knowledge for yourself, you basically have to rely on other people's opinions of you, and maybe they don't have the knowledge or the experience with you that they need to have to make a very well-educated decision for you. So really you have to be your best mentor, your best teacher, and ask the right questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can remember back, how, mature yet difficult decision was for you to make that shift to worry about the less, in your words, sexy things or shiny things like lifting heavier weights to working on sprint mechanics, right? And how much better you got, running because you got better at the skill of running, right? And one of the best ways to prevent hamstring injuries are actually fairly simple. It's to sprint more. and research kind of shows that, and letting go of, to Mitch's earlier comment, what you're good at, right, to work on one of the things to make that another strength that you have, in this case, another tool, your speed. One of the other words you mentioned there, Murph, was reduction. How do you find things to eliminate? And I think it's a good topic to kind of hit on with all you, because especially now, but more so for everybody, there's a lot of stuff out there. On Instagram, you could see 1,000 different training philosophies, exercises, read up on blogs. There's just so much information. And, I know, Mitch, you and I have talks on this frequently about everything that's bombarding us, but want to start with Keilani here. Like, how do you guys deal with all that stuff coming at you when you have your plan, right? You want to be committed to that plan. But at the same time, there's new stuff out there that could help, right? How do you balance, and sift through the noise to accept, hey, this might be something I should adopt, versus like, this is something I'm going to ignore. I mean, there's a great quote we talk about all the time, Steve Jobs: strategy is what you choose not to do. And a lot of what your guys' approach is and your plans is, I'm not going to do that. That might be some of the more important decisions you make. So, talk a little bit about how that plays a role, or how you've approached that, whether it's through social media or friends and family.
Yeah, I think, as us as athletes, we're always trying to grow, and we're always trying to find new ways to get better and new ways to get stronger and better and all of that. And so when you're seeing so much on social media about all these different types of workouts and stuff, it's like, it's somewhat tempting to try out. I know Right now I'm doing boxing classes, and honestly, it's really for a way. I'm doing it with my teammates. We're doing it on Zoom, and it's just a fun thing right now to do with my teammates. And so it's like, I do that about once a week, and, just to have some sanity here in my house. But I think, thinking of like workouts and stuff and finding what works for me, I think that's the biggest thing. Is I try to take things with a grain of salt and be like, is this going to be beneficial for me as an athlete on the field? And for these boxing workouts, I find it beneficial because I'm doing it with my friends. It's kind of my socializing hour.
Yep.
But I think, thinking of like things being able to take them in, and, when there's new strength coaches that are introduced to our team within like the past year, we've had different coaches come in telling us like, we need to start doing this exercise more. I'm a lot more skeptical of things like that, just because I know what does work for me and what workouts do work for me and what makes my arm feel better. And so I'm not necessarily going to do workouts if this coach is telling, or I'm not going to be doing push-ups in my workouts if the strength coach is telling me, you need to like strengthen this more. And for me, I've tried it, and I don't like being sore on this side of my arm when I'm pitching. I'd rather the soreness kind of go towards my back, because I guess it could handle it more, especially if I'm pitching like the next day. And so, just being able to learn what's worked for my body, what makes my body feel good, and just being skeptical of like what those workouts are. And like I said, I guess that kind of has come with trial and error. I've tried different workouts out, and it doesn't help my body feel good. And so, I'm just skeptical of what kind of information I'm taking in.
Yeah. So you continue to remain open, but a lot of times the word used in academia is a charitable skeptic, that you're open, right? But, it's, they're going to have to prove themselves innocent, at least whatever training philosophy, may be imposed or at least portrayed, on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And Mitch, I know a lot of your interest around this space has really centered, which is great, around the recovery realm and techniques that are out there to, to feel better, to expedite, recovery after workouts. And so, talk about like, what are ways, or at least decision trees you use internally to, make some of those decisions about what to let into your world, right? And versus what to say, what, that's great, but I don't think that's going to help me.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have touched on it, but there's definitely a lot of trial and error that goes into it. I think and vetting out to people that I trust, that are smart people that, have given me really good advice. A lot of stuff I hear or read or see on social media, I always run it by you and see what you think, and just try to take in as much info as I can, but then ask people around me, what they think, and then make an educated decision on what I can add in. But a lot of times, I'm more looking to like what I can take out and how efficient I can be with just like the nuts and bolts and the foundation and the core. This is what I need, and I don't need all this extra stuff. And I kind of always look at it as like, what's the risk and what's the reward? Like, because nowadays on social media, especially Instagram and Twitter, there's you could find hundreds of different self-proclaimed hitting experts. You can find hundreds of different self-proclaimed movement specialists, rehab. Like, I mean, there's everything. And how are these people really vetted? Are they experts? You don't really know. So watching that and maybe trying to learn and hear what they're saying, and then process it, see if it makes sense, and decide whether you want to add it in or not. But having in mind that risk reward attitude, like, is this worth potentially taking away from my strength? And then just trying to learn as much as I can about my body. And then at the end of the day, it all comes down to having the awareness to see whether it actually really does make me feel better, or if it makes me sore in certain areas where I don't want to be sore, like Keilani's saying. But I know we've had a lot of talk around, I wear an Oura ring, track my sleep, and there's a lot of different things you can do to track data, and a lot of them are great. But like you said last week when we were talking, that you and your awareness of your own body is the best, and the human body is probably the craziest piece of technology that all these other technologies are way behind. So having awareness of how you feel and what you need, I think, is the most important piece.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that risk reward, because a lot of the discussions I think that we talk about, really risk isn't just getting injured or losing strength. Risk can also just be losing time, right? Because that's all of our biggest resource, right, is time. Everybody on this call, there's only a certain amount of time that we have. If we're talking minutely, there's only a certain amount of time we have to prepare for our sport. And unlike other careers, professional athletes, don't retire at 65, right? Your time is much shorter, right? And your ability to use that time within the window becomes really important, and identifying how you can be more efficient with that time you have. Murph, kind of same question to you, like, finishing up on this reductionist approach, like, how do you balance that, openness, right, with, also being convicted of what works for you, and kind of layered in there with the distractions that you get approached by, with whether it be outside people or social media or friends and family. Like, how do you balance all that, to keep it, I guess, as effective as possible what you're doing?
Yeah, for me, it kind of comes down to results. What am I putting on the field? What's coming? What is the game telling me in a way? Is it something that's related to skill? Is it something that's related to the weight room? Is it something that's related to recovery? All of those are traceable back to what you're doing off the field, and kind of what your volume is, what your intensity is off the field, and what you're doing. Say you have a hamstring pull, well, that's probably traceable back to how you treated your body prior to that. And it goes the same for skill work. Am I not hitting like I used to? Did I change something? What did I change? What should I change? All these things are all traceable back to kind of a central point that the results of the game are going to tell you need to change or not. And that, touching upon Keilani, saying that, us as athletes, we're always striving. We're always trying to achieve more. We're always trying to get better. But sometimes we get in our own way doing that. And obviously, with all the information that's available, that probably happens more often than not in today's world, which is crazy because, a lot of times, like Mitch was saying, if you're able to just get down to the nuts and bolts and get really good at those, you'll probably have a much more successful career than the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah. Just focusing on the big rocks in a way, right?
For sure.
I think you mentioned adjustments, and that was kind of one of the other things I wanted to key on with you guys. So, Keilani, from a softball standpoint, you pretty much won every award possible. As an individual contributor at the team level, obviously you're not retired. So, how do you kind of keep making sure that you're improving? What adjustments do you look to make at the end of an off season? How do you evaluate that so that improvement continues to kind of keep you at the top of your game?
That's a good question. I feel like I'm still trying to figure that out. I think for me, just, realizing like what were my downfalls throughout the season, what made me feel good throughout the season, what made me feel bad throughout the season, and kind of going from there. I think, like, thinking about about last summer going into this season, I think I could have done more arm rehab just so I could have a little bit more mobility in my arm. And, in past seasons, it might've been like hip mobility and stuff like that. And so just understanding like what's going to make me feel good when I like to last throughout the season. And I think that ends up correlating like to have a longer career for softball. That is, I mean, especially for softball, I think it's a little difficult for a female athlete in our sport where our professional league is not very developed. And, I think for us, a lot of times, like I remember when I was graduating high school, the pro league was more looked at as playing maybe 1 year, maybe 3 years. It was kind of rare for girls to be playing until they're 30. And so for me, I'm 28 now. And so it's really cool to be able to see that there's a lot more girls playing into their 30s, and, women being able to like have kids and being able to come back from kids and still competing for the Olympics, which is something we really didn't see for softball, when I was growing up at least. And so, I think for me, just trying to keep my career to go as long as possible and be able to feel good throughout that career.
Yeah. So in a way, right, towards the end of that season, you get a real clear sense too of what the prior off season, what was lasting or not, right? Because if, as you mentioned, the rotator cuff, right, if you're noticing mobility start to degrade at the end of the season, in your shoulder, but other areas maybe not so much, right? That can be a key indicator of, what can be enhanced in that off season, right? To provide a more long lasting, effect when the season does come about. Yeah. I think back to Mitch's comment around awareness. I think one of the things that excites us about softball and baseball is they're the most habitual sports, right? Certainly a lot of superstitions and habits of doing the same thing over and over again, which ultimately is the best way to improve your movement or your health, right? Is repetition, of things, really trying to perfect it, or get as close as you can, since perfection's, impossible. Habits drive these change, but at the same time, every off season, right, you can't do the same thing, because all three of you are not the same person you were 12 months ago. Everybody's different. And so I think over to Mitch here in training, how do you balance like those components, right? Of, your habits and performance, right? Your drive to be, and that drive to be more innovative, right? Because there's things that have worked for you in the past, but then things continue to evolve. How does data play a role for you, whether you mentioned the Oura Ring or obviously Sparta or any other? How does data play a role for you, and how you evaluate, what habits need to be enhanced or dropped versus what new things might need to be included?
Yeah, I would say every off season it's not like a huge revamp every year. There's just some small tweaks, with the training. And I would say like this last year, coming in, deadlift has always been my huge lift to get stiffer, to, get my core tighter, to be stronger, which usually would keep me healthy, keep me strong, and help me move way better. Just because being a guy who's hypermobile, deadlift was huge. And then this off season, we started doing back squats, and I noticed I felt so much stronger. And that's what goes back to my point earlier. Back squats were always tough for me. I never felt like I could ever put a ton of weight on, but over the last couple of years, I've gotten really strong and really good with deadlifts. And it was almost like a sign, was like, hey, maybe you should go be doing this. And then in reality, like, started sprinting faster, started jumping higher. Everything started to play better. And I think I mixed that with some different jumping stuff. And I found a great benefit from that. And just finding different ways to take care of my body too, whether it's going to acupuncture or going to massage. And I think the biggest thing is understanding that, we'd all like to play this game for as long as we can, and, for 10, 15 years, but the reality of a professional player's window is rather small and compared to your life. So trying to maximize everything you can in this window, trying to learn as much as I can, trying to get better each off season, make small tweaks, and just cut out more of I would not say bad stuff, but get better at like sleeping, get better at even better. Every year I feel like I go into spring training, I always say I'm in the best shape of my life. And I think it's because every off season I've gotten more simple in a way. I've taken more and more things out, and I've seen really good results. And just learning from, there's going to be times where you do new things and it actually doesn't help. Like Murph said, if I'm not performing good on the field, then it was like, maybe I shouldn't have tweaked my swing in this way, because some guy on Instagram thought that's what I needed or something like that, So just going back to the basics and understanding what made you good and what got you here, but then still having an open mind to be able to take little pieces and add them in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Reminded me of a story when I was in college. My coach, when I asked for a new plan, he said, yeah, do this. Come back to me. We'll get you a new plan. When you're sleeping 10 hours a night, when you're having 12 servings of vegetables, and when you're drinking your body weight in ounces of water every day. When you do those three things, we'll sit down and go over your new plan. And I went away, being the young kid I did, and tried to do those things, and realized kind of that Mr. Miyagi moment that he just gave me a plan, right? That like those three like basics, right? Like that was all that was needed. And trying to do that is hard enough before we add in all these other things. Tom, over to you, like making adjustments each year. around daily awareness, being a catcher, right? Like you're in that same position every day, right? Putting quite a bit of stress in discrete areas, extreme stress in some cases. How do you combat like those repetitive stresses every day you endure from catching, particularly during the season?
Yeah, so for me, it comes down to self-care. And a lot of it comes down to just overall tone. I kind of mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
So for me, it kind of learning more about mindfulness and getting into meditation, starting my day that way was huge for me. Just based off my Sparta scan, I've always had an extreme load. I've always, that kind of coincides with the catcher position as well. So in my mind, I'm always trying to mitigate that in a way through my nervous system. I'm trying to stay as parasympathetic as I can throughout the day, so that when I get to the field and I have to turn that switch on to where I'm in that fight or flight mode, I have it all stored up and I'm ready and I feel refreshed, as opposed to feeling like a catcher that's caught 120 games.
Yeah.
And that's been huge for me throughout my career. And that's something I've had to learn because, I'm sure as most of us can agree, we're kind of, as athletes, we're in go mode most of the day. And, it's very easy for us to flip the switch on. And sometimes our biggest tool is to be able to flip the switch off. And with my movement and signature and the way I play and perform, that's been huge for me to learn and to evaluate every day, and to have that awareness has just transferred over not only onto the field, but into my life, and, made me a better person for sure.
Yeah, the holistic approach. I love it. One of the words you said in there is parasympathetic. You're not always going to hear that from a lot of athletes, or, but it's kind of a sign that you really kind of taken ownership over like really understanding different principles in physiology, so wanted to kind of touch on that with all three of you. What are some resources you guys use to learn, which can be as basic as, YouTube videos all the way to, Soviet texts in some of the discussions we've had, Tom, like, so I think, back to you, Tom, like, what are some of your favorite resources for learning, just for self-improvement?
Yeah. So, over my career, I'd say starting with college, I've kind of built a foundation of people that I have a chance to rely on. And obviously not everybody has that sort of resource build up in their life, especially younger athletes. But at the same time, you have to trust the people that have given you results and have helped you along the way, more so than people that have no knowledge of your background or history, or have had any word in your training. And so for me, that's number one, is the people that I trust. What do they have for me? Yes, and that's always a common question I ask you. Whenever we got together, is what are you reading? What do you have for me now? What can I get my hands on?
Yep.
And then take it from there. And typically that resource leads to a different resource. And you just kind of build this foundation of knowledge that you're able to revert back upon, and whether that's helping yourself or other teammates, you've built up this store of credible information and are able to kind of decipher what's good and what's bad. And luckily, I've been around enough to have that high list of people that I can trust and go to at any time to give me the answers that I need, or at least point me in the right direction.
You basically have a personal advisory board in a way.
In a way, and I'm very thankful for that. And like I said, it's come through not only kind of communicating with other people, but also using that information to my advantage. Yeah,
and so kind of Mitch, circling back, same question to you. Favorite resources for learning. Obviously people, and as Tom mentioned, are a big source of kind of your guys' trusted network. Any other areas for you where you like to look, or tend to seek out education and learning for your own health?
Yeah, like Tom said, I mean, people's probably the number one thing. You have, I would say, I've learned the most about training and diet and fitness through you. But I think other ways, it's always good to have an open mind. It's always good for me. I want to learn as much as I can for myself, and then come in if I ever have new ideas or a different way of looking at it. I kind of vet it out to you or someone else close to me that I trust, and then I kind of make the decision whether this is good to add in or not.
Yep.
And having those resources is great. And I think as you get older as an athlete, like, you should always be looking to build relationships with certain people that, can give you that advice, because it's extremely beneficial, especially in baseball, whether it's a hitting coach or a strength coach or whoever it may be. And then for me, like right now, I'm like self-improvement geek. So I love everything, whether mindset, any category that can help me, recovery, fitness, training. I'm huge into meditation as well. And I think, because it's all about having as much focus as you possibly can in any given moment, and then being able to, when it's relax mode, completely shut that off. That's something I've really struggled with over my career, and I think I've gotten better and better at dealing with that. About, when I go home from the field, it's not let's process everything and have swimming in my head all night long. It's being able to process it once, get it out, and then now it's family time, or now it's, I'm hanging out with my wife and being fully present with her. But I would say recently, like Audible, or whether it's reading a book or listening to a book in the car, taking advantage of, like, I would call it like dead time, where whether I'm cleaning the house or cooking, or I love music, but also listening to a book on Audible. I think now there's so many, our life has gotten very, not easy, but like there's so many things that we have available to us that make life easier, to where in the past, maybe 20 years ago, you didn't have your phone to tell you where to go when you're driving. So your brain's working so much more throughout a day, where now it's like,
good point.
It's a lot easier. You get out your phone, and your phone can do anything for you. So you're not working parts of your brain that I think that in the past we used to work a lot more. So I'm always trying to soak up information and learn in these dead times that I talk about, whether it's like driving in the car or cooking or doing dishes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I want to, with that in mind, I want to kick over to kind of one last kind of question for each of you, and kind of top three, like, what are your top, like, three, like, non-negotiable daily or movement habits? Like, no matter what happens, like I go to a desert island, I'm taking these three things, like, and it can be things, it can be processes, routines, right? Because I think, you guys have all really kind of keyed in on keeping things simple. And by the way, I'm going to stall here, right? So you guys have time to, like, kind of think of what those three things are. I think it's really easy right now to get bombarded with a lot of different things, and it's hard to cling on to everything. But I'm sure that there's certain things that probably at this point you guys aren't even aware of, that, like, these three things, like, I gotta do. Like, we work with the Cavs. Like, one of LeBron's things is 12 hours of sleep, no matter what, every night. That's my thing. 12 hours of sleep. Yeah. I mean, that's the primary way I get our kids to go to bed, is I tell them, look, LeBron sleeps 12 hours. Like, means you got to sleep 12 hours. There's a couple other things he does, but that's just one example of, like, no matter what, like, that's my non-negotiable thing, whether it's interviews, shoot arounds, I got to get that in. So, really in any order, kind of top three habits you guys, routines that you guys got to have, non-negotiable. Anybody want to go first while other people are thinking?
I mean, I can do two. I definitely, yes. For me, it's time in bed, because with Oura Ring or any other sleep tracking devices, like, people think that you get in bed at 11, you wake up at 7, that you got 8 hours sleep. That's
right.
Not true. You don't sleep. For me, especially, like, I'm not sound asleep for those 8 hours. So I try to get time in bed, 10 hours solid of time in bed.
Great point.
I hope that equates to like 9 hours of sleep.
Great point. 10 hours time in bed.
Yeah. Sleep is a number one for me. I just feel so much better. My focus is better. My energy is higher, and my body feels better. And then two, taking 10 minutes, usually earlier in the day once, and then before I go to sleep, and do a meditation, just to kind of clear my head. And I found that really helps the time. People think that, the meditation itself is helping you, which it is, but it's also the time away from the meditation when you're able to think clearly, and not listen to that voice in your head that might be telling you to do some stuff that you don't want to listen to. So having the awareness when those thoughts come in and being able to like differentiate between the two is huge. And then I guess this is my third would be, and if I was on an island, this would happen a lot, is just get outside, get in the sun, be in nature a little bit, and just appreciate the beauty around us. Like not be inside all day long on my phone. Get outside, get in the, whether it's the trees or at the beach or whatever it may be.
That's great. And just so you know, 2 months ago or 3 months ago, you called me out because I don't meditate. So I've been going 2 months straight every day. So
you seen any benefit?
Yeah. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So I think it's another opportunity that, the learning's bi-directional, right? And the motivation and the, I think that's the great part about particularly the area we're in now, but just the situation that can be created between athletes and organizations or athletes and practitioners. Yeah. Keilani or Tom, one of you guys want to go with your top three?
Okay, I'll go.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've thought of the third one yet, but maybe it'll come to
Two's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so if I was stuck on an island, I would say a lacrosse ball for sure.
Yep.
I could get in anywhere, helping me
Dig
out.
into your shoulder, your hips.
Yeah, shoulder,
Yeah.
hip, anywhere you could use it if you don't have a PVC pipe or foam roller. Lacrosse ball, I would say a journal. I think that's helped me a lot. Just being able to kind of write my thoughts down, whether it's before a game, after a game, before bullpen, after. I really like to get to that, whether it's a good or bad day. I mean, that's just kind of like where I'm able to figure out if like I'm really like focusing on the right things throughout the game or throughout like the process of what I'm doing that day. So
Almost a data dump,
yeah, I just like to vent to myself and, just call myself out in my journal, I guess. So that for sure. And I don't know if I could think of a third one. I mean, sleep is obviously a big one for me. I'm a terrible sleeper. And since everyone is talking about meditation, I have found that the sleep meditations, I've been listening to YouTubes lately with, it's like a sleep hypnosis thing. That's been helping me a lot go to sleep. So props to the meditations.
Yeah. Binaural beats. Yeah. It's great. Mm-hmm. Tom? Murph, you got it.
Yeah, for me, number one for sure is meditation. That even I think comes before sleep in terms of how I feel throughout the day. It's something I have absolutely learned to love. It's transformed my life, I would say, more so than anything I've done.
Amazing.
As it relates to the mental game. Yeah, and it's obviously sleep. Sleep is number two. It's very obvious. AAA always comes to mind with how hectic that schedule was and how terrible you always felt because you play a 3 or 4 game series. You're waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning to get on a flight to go play that night in some other city. And anybody that's done that realizes the importance of sleep. And then number three, I would say my family. I need my family with me. I need my kids. They're almost like an automatic shut off button for me. When it comes to them, it's very hard for me to focus on what went wrong in my day as it relates to baseball when I'm around them, and having that in my hands and be able to enjoy is as powerful as anything I have.
The trigger, it's a trigger, to shut it off.
Yes.
Love it. But again, thanks to our panelists and thanks to everyone out there, and stay safe.